Thank you all very much. We will now resume proceedings of Finance Committee. Please be seated. I've been informed that the Honourable Premier now has the answer to the questions posed with respect to appropriation HCA 9, National Disaster Preparedness and Response Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, this is a question that was posed by the member from East End with regard to the capacity of the two civic centres there from a shelter standpoint. East End Civic Centre has a capacity of 240 persons, Gun Bay 65. For the sake of completeness, I should say that in Northside, the Greater Ebank Civic Centre has a capacity for 185. And we also have the Clifton Hunter High School, which has a capacity for 630 persons and is therefore capable of taking any overflow that might occur from East End, if that were to arise.
Thank you. Mr. McLean.
If he could just give me the one for the high school again?
630.
630. Okay. Mr. Chairman, we know how this business goes in that. During Hurricane Ivan, we were stretched for space in East End while she was in the school. If it is possible to put the school back on that list, and the Minister for Education is not here, but certainly I will bring that question up during her time on the stand. Mr. Chairman, I wonder if the Premier can say whether or not we have considered how important a generator is to that school, not only for hurricane, but certainly for provisions for school during time of outages, which is more important because that's on a round-the-clock basis.
Mr. Chairman, I've made, since we had the initial discussion, made some inquiries and have been informed that we actually do have the generator. The issue, the issue is the construction of a proper house, if I may call it that, in which to place it, and then obviously the rewiring and so forth into the electrical system. But the plan is to do exactly what the member is asking for.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. The Adventist Church in Northside is no longer used as a hurricane shelter?
Mr. Chairman, my understanding is that that was removed from the list quite some time ago because of its proximity to the sea and structural issues.
But I agree with the proximity to the sea, but structural issues, the government itself invested, as I recall, substantial sums to make it and stuff. But the other question is that there's not a lot of awareness in my community that the Clifton Hunter is coming online and what time is coming online. So I would ask I spoke to the hazard manager about it earlier, but I think we need to get some publicity out for particularly Eastern and Northside community, but also breakers in Eastern end of Borden Town as well, that the Clifton Hunter school will be available as a hurricane shelter and stuff.
Will do, sir. As you are well aware and have always supported, that facility was constructed on the basis that it would be able to serve as a shelter, not just something ad hoc, but it was designed to be able to accommodate them. So we should be good in that respect.
I agree. It's just that the community needs to know.
Agreed.
Mr. McLean, you have a question?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, I recently visited both civic centers in East End with a little young man from the ministry, I believe.
Mr. Warm.
Worms, a little young man by the name of Worms, to look at the repairs needed for the civic center, and particularly the one in Gun Bay had roof problems. Do we know if all the repairs have been affected on those?
Thank you. That, Mr. Chair, falls under facilities management, and Mr. Troy Worms is the acting head. I recently got a report after the visit, and I know that they were in contact with Public Works to schedule the necessary works, and I will follow it up to ensure that it's done expeditiously.
Mr. Chairman, I thank the minister for that, because we're 4 days into the hurricane season, and if the repairs on that. Okay. And Mr. Chairman, the Premier spoke about the building of the place and the haven't had the generator. That generator has been in place now for about 3 years. We have had it on the ground. No fault of this government, obviously, but can the Premier say when, or if he has an idea as to when this is going to be affected, that we build that building, because it's...
No, Mr. Chairman, I don't have that information. That is, apparently, from what I understand, that is the responsibility of the Ministry of Education. Okay. And I don't have that information, but we can undertake to find out and answer during the course of the Finance Committee.
Thank you. Are there any more questions concerning appropriation HCA 9? Okay, if there are no more questions, then all those in favor of HCA 9, National Disaster Preparedness and Response Services, for $1,157,416, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
And those against, no. Returning to HCA 11, Prison Services. Were there outstanding questions on that? Yeah. I think it was the total cost of the annual cost of each prisoner.
You did that. You just need to take the vote.
Okay. 64,000. But I think at the time the director had retracted that statement. Is that correct? Okay. Fair enough. Okay, so if there are no questions, we'll proceed to the vote on that. So all those in favor of HCA 11, Prison Services, for $9,769,643, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
And those against, no. HCA 12, Correctional Supervision, Intervention and Support Services, for $7,255,249 on page 68 of the annual plan and estimates.
That's where the outstanding question was, about the amount of monitoring. How many monitoring facilities we had.
Thank you, Mr. McLean.
Mr. Chairman, my information is that the prison only has one tag available, but they don't have anyone tagged. The tags that are, the persons that are tagged are those who have been done either by the police or by the court system. No one within the prison system is wearing a tag.
So, Mr. Chairman, where is the budget for that then? Because there was a capital injection last year for, well, this financial year for additional monitors. And this is where it is monitored, they are monitored from.
Mr. Chairman, the money is in this vote. The member is right. But his question, as I understood it, related to how many were actually tagged by the prison. That was my understanding of the question. My answer is that there are none. Those who are wearing tags, they've been put on by the police or by the courts system, not the prison system.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, but I wasn't asking about how many was put on by the prison. I always thought it was the courts that ordered it and police if they got them on remand. But this is where we monitor it. And one of the complaints last year, or in October, was that they could use more tags, but they didn't have them, and they were going to buy some 50 or 100 more, something like that. So I'm wondering if those tags were bought and how they are working, because at the time there were complaints about how well those tags, how effective those tags were as well. Remember that?
Mr. Chairman, I'll ask Mr. Wesley Howell to answer that question.
Mr. Howell, for the record, could you please state your full name and title?
Wesley Howell, Deputy Chief Officer, Ministry of Home Affairs, responsibility for public safety and security.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, we have 36 tags that are budgeted for. The courts ideally would like to see that doubled. The primary use of the tags now are for juveniles and drug court cases. And with the length of time it takes for the cases to make it through the courts, puts additional strain on the bail facilities. The courts and ourselves are actually hesitant to grow the number of tags until we can introduce the technology which is resistant to the foil tampering, which is an issue that we know of. I'm happy to say that just within the last week or so, we've started testing some technology that seems to have some promise for resisting the covering of foil, and then if that works, we can now increase the number of tags and supplement the tags we already have with this technology to be able to tag even higher risk persons on bail.
Thank you. Mr. Miller? Mr. Miller?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, does these tags have a GPS component so that the person monitoring knows where the person is at all time?
Mr. Chairman, yes, sir, and the supplemental technology has a location base which is in the confines of the person's home or wherever they're restricted to be. If the device, the secondary device is tampered with, it alarms. If the person doesn't report to that device, then we know that they haven't reported in. So it's a report by default, and if it doesn't report, we know something's happened. So if they covered it with foil, we would know because it doesn't report in. In addition to the GPS, then it would be a home base signaling between the two of them. We know whether or not the device has been tampered with.
Mr. McLean, you have a question, sir?
About a week, figure it out.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, did Mr. Howell say that there are 36 budgeted for?
Yes, sir. In the current budget amount, what's listed in the output is the number of hours of monitoring. Behind that number is the number of tags that are budgeted for. That's 36. It's the same for both years. The funding for the additional tags would come from the courts in terms of the asset forfeiture fund. So it wouldn't impact the budget for increasing the number of tags in this financial year.
I'm confused, but here's what I got. That in this budget,
Yes, sir.
and the one and this one that we're dealing with too,
Yes,
this
sir.
budget, this financial year that we're in, there were 36 budgeted for.
Yes, sir.
And there's 36 in this budget that is coming up as well.
Yes, sir.
So that's 72. And they
No,
haven't.
sir, it's the same number. True, Mr. Chairman. The budgeted amount allocates for the operation of 36 tags in 13-14 and operation of the same 36 tags in 14-15. The option that we have at our disposal is the courts would step forward and fund additional tags up to the capacity of the existing staffing to monitor somewhere in the region of 65 or so tags without having to hire more staff to monitor the tags.
I believe you finished confused me then, Mr. Howell, but let me try do it. Let me try say it, and then let's see if you can get it. Are you, Mr. Chairman, are you telling me that the 36 that was budgeted in 13-14 was never received?
No, Ms.
Mr. Chairman, if I can clarify, the tags are actually leased, sir. So the budgeted amount is to lease the tags for 1 year and lease the tags for another year. So it's the same budgeted amount for it.
Okay.
With the opportunity coming up with a new technology, we will proceed with a RFI and hopefully a RFP after that, and evaluate the options of outright purchasing the devices or leasing devices, depending on which one is the best cost option for the government going forward. But currently, the devices are leased, so it's not a capital expenditure; it's a recurrent expenditure to lease the 36 devices.
Okay. This is deja vu, because last year we were saying the same thing. Well, earlier this year, last year in October, we were saying this identical thing, that there was a review on the way to ascertain what was more efficient, purchase or continuing to lease. Purchasing was going to require additional software when they change it, I believe, and the likes. We would have to pay for that separately. So that was never done.
No, sir, we were waiting on through you, Mr. Chairman, sorry. We were waiting on the technology to get to the point where we can defeat the foil issue with the RFP. Now that we're there, we're at the point we can now do that, but we weren't there up until this time.
And 36 will bring it up to the 50-something that we talked about that is manageable by the staff.
36 is the same number carried forward, so if and when we do the purchase, we would purchase additional. If it's a lease, we would add additional ones or change out the ones we have for new technology.
Okay, where's that budget?
Again, sir, the budget is within that particular output. Is recorded as hours, but behind those hours are the amounts that allocated for the lease of 36. And the courts will make up the difference to get to the 65 or thereabouts.
So there should be something in here for 30 more.
The
29 more
the judiciary should have budgeted for that amount, sir.
for 29 more.
Yes, sir. But not in our vote, in their vote.
Okay. Getting it clear soon. I'll get there.
Mr. Miller?
To you, Mr. Chairman, on the CCTV cameras. As I understand it now, if a crime occurs in my constituency and the police in Bordentown want to look at CCTV footage, they have to make a written application to Gold Command. If they approve it, they can then go to 911 and see the footage. Is that the procedure?
I think there are multiple procedures, sir. If we dive too deep, I might have to defer. But the Bordentown Police Station has a monitoring station, so a police officer with the right credentials can look at live video and look at historical video. The written permission comes in typically when it's not a criminal matter, so if it's traffic or otherwise, and then is operating outside of the scope of the rules of engagement, then the police commissioner is written to, and there's another level for the attorney general to be written to. But the direct answer to your question, sir, is that at the Bodden Town Station, they have a computer that is connected to the CCTV network, and they can monitor live and recorded video from there.
And they can, in Bodden Town, you're telling me that they can, on their monitors, they can start at Rum Point, come to Chisholm Store, go to Old Man Way, come to Frankstown, and follow a vehicle through in Bodden Town Police Station.
Yes, sir.
And that is up and working.
The technology is there, sir. Whether or not that's an operational reality, I can't answer that part.
Okay. Are there officers at the Bodden Town Police Station that have the training to do that? Be careful when I answer, you know.
Mr. Chairman, I've been informed that the officers some of the officers at Bodden Town have had the training and the credentials to then operate the CCTV monitoring station.
How often does the people responsible for these CCTV cameras go out and look at them and make sure that they haven't been turned down to look at the bottom of the light pole with a hook stick, or that there ain't no touch leaves in the way of it, or bush?
Daily, the supervisor responsible for the cameras does an electronic inventory of what cameras are operational, which ones are down. The physical inspection is every 45 days, done by an outsourced entity, sir. Unless there's a known problem and somebody's dispatched.
Mr. McLean?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I would like to ask Mr. Howell, if that's who will answer it. The first phase of the CCTV meant that they were quite sparsely installed. When is the second phase coming online?
Mr. Chairman, when we have the available funds, which is certainly not now.
Is there any consideration to using some of these cameras for speeders? Because I can promise you, in 1 month, in Northside on a Saturday evening and a Sunday evening, you could collect substantial revenue. And what is needed to be done to upgrade it to that technology if it isn't currently there now?
Mr. Bush?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can say that speed cameras as well as traffic management cameras, which would detect vehicles that cross on the roadway that are registered as not being insured, or the registration is not up to date. That was all in the master plan. However, the technology that we purchased in phase 1 does not have that. And as the Premier stated, that there are no immediate plans to upgrade the system, even for traffic enforcement. But I do agree with you, sir, that through you, Mr. Chairman, that it would be very beneficial to traffic control.
Mr. Chairman, just to follow up, the Premier said that when we get money, what is an average cost of these cameras? That is all the components and dividing it by the amount of cameras that we have.
Mr. Chairman, one camera pod with 3 cameras and the technology to link it back to the central recording station is about $20,000, sir.
And the second phase, how many of those we were putting in? Why I'm asking, Mr. Chairman, I think specifically of my constituency, we got cameras strategically placed along the road, but somewhere in between, criminals can get away. And they do. And we need to install these cameras much quicker. But anyway, how much is it that was planned for the second phase? If we know, I mean, you know, we know how much we got now. We should know how much we had planned for the second phase.
The first phase was 2.6 million and has 280 cameras in 80 different locations. So the locations were chosen based on choke points and also based on hotspots for criminal activity and public safety issues. What we've done is move the cameras in some locations depending on whether or not the crime patterns have changed or public safety issues created in another location as best we can. The further phases had upwards of 20 cameras, 20 camera locations, additional locations.
If I may add to that, Mr. Chairman, just for the point of clarity, the $2.6 million for the 280 cameras in the locations that we have now also included the infrastructure cost of building the system in itself. So the storage and the records management system that we would not have to purchase again in a phase 2. So the simply dividing the 280 cameras by the $2.6 million spent, we wouldn't need to spend a large portion of the money already spent in the infrastructure. So a phase 2 of spending $1.5 million more, we know would give us far more cameras than we have now.
Wow. I think you have the premier ears every day, all day, 24 hours a day. I think you need to get to him and convince him to spend some of that road money to put up these cameras.
Mr. McLean, is there another question?
I'm asking the premier if he'll consider that.
We'll add it to the long list of considerations, sir.
Mr. Miller?
All right, well, you know, the country's blood will be on your hands, not mine.
Mr. Miller?
Yeah. The $20,000 camera will have the capacity for speed checks and all the other traffic offenses.
Mr. Chairman, the $20,000 price tag per pod is not for an individual camera. So an individual camera is $1,500 or thereabouts for a fixed camera, and about $5,000 for a camera that can zoom and tilt and pan. The meat of the expenditure comes from the industrial networking equipment that has to survive in the heat of the day and the humidity on the pole and be able to transmit back to the recording center the high definition images that are coming from up to 3 cameras. So that is where the bulk of the expenditure is in the technology that does that backhaul. The cameras themselves are much lower. The speed cameras are a different beast altogether. Those are a special beast, and some of the options we have available to us is not only speed at one location, but average speed between 2 cameras. So when people learn the location, they don't slow down and bypass. So those are all options that are available, providing we have funding.
But the average speed cameras would be cheaper and easier to put up to get the money from the speeders. So I would think that you could make a business case that if you put up 5 or 6, well, it should be an even number because you got between 2 cameras, 6 or 8 of those or 10 of those. In a year, this thing could probably be self-funding, and you could have the money to install the other cameras. And then,
If that was a question.
Mr. Miller, that's a suggestion. Is there a question in there, sir?
no, I'm asking him if that would work.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, through you, other jurisdictions that have installed speed cameras, some are owned by the government, some are owned by private sector entities that operate them with the government legislation backing it. So there are options available for going forward. But even a public-private initiative to do the speed cameras would have to have the necessary permissions and agreements before we were able to commit to that, sir.
Are there any further questions with respect to this appropriation? If there are no further questions, then all those in favor of HCA 12, Correctional Supervision, Intervention and Support Services, for $7,255,249, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
And those against, no. HCA 15, Emergency Domestic Fire Services, $6,593,891, found on page 7 to 1 of the annual plan and estimates. Yep, fair enough. We will also at this time consider HCA 17, Aerodrome Fire Services, for $4,880,356, found on page 72 of the annual plan and estimates. So we are considering HCA 15 and HCA 17. Are there any questions with respect to these appropriations? Mr. Miller?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, the Frank Sound Fire Station. It is my understanding that if the fire truck is called out in an emergency, it should have with it at least 3, no less than 3, preferably 4 people. And it is my understanding that it is often the case at Frank Sound that the staff level does not meet that criteria. No, but that's good.
Is there?
They got one, especially when they're using a lot of truck.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I am advised that that is not the case, that even if it is required that overtime be paid, that they always meet the minimum requirements.
And the minimum requirement when, if you have to use a ladder truck, is 4 people, right? Or 5. You have people to watch different things and up on the ladder and whatnot.
My name is Roy Grant, the Acting Chief Fire Officer. Actually, it is a substation, so what it is, a first response, and then it's backed up by the main station, and then off-duty people call in, so it's basically a build-up of sources, and the minimum amount at Frankstown Station is 3 men, and it doesn't go below that. Even if you have to pay overtime, whatever it takes, that's what's happening.
Mr. Connolly?
It's just a question since the chief fire officer is there. Then just going back to the north side fire station. The fence has been broken down there for over 2 years. I mean, is there any move to put up the 30 blocks or whatever it is, it looks like, to repair that fence?
Actually, I've only been back here for 2 months, and I was made to understand that, and there is effort being made to repair that fence. So I can be held responsible for that.
No, I wasn't suggesting you were, sir, but just an observation.
Mr. Bush, you were asking a question earlier.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. The West Bay Fire Station, I stop there often, and just as I do the main one in town, and I notice that some of the bay doors have been, for a long time, need to be repaired. Or any of this in this present budget to prepare some of these doors. And in fact, in one of the stations, you can even sometimes have a little scent of mold. I know that's been there since Hurricane Ivan, when the water went through the whole place. Is there any plans to fix up and get these up to some kind of decent standard for the workmen to be there?
The short answer, Mr. Chairman, is yes. I actually addressed this specifically in my wind-up yesterday to the budget. That's been budgeted for.
Mr. Miller, you had a question earlier, sir.
What is the total height and stores of the building that your ladder truck and Frank Sand can service now? 5 or 4?
The ladder is 100 feet, and if my memory serves me right, it's a 7-story.
Are there any further questions with respect to these two appropriations? Mr. McLean, you have a question, sir?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, I know we had our difficulties with the fire department recently. They have been in the news and the likes. I'm wondering if the two good gentlemen can tell us if there are any improvements in those areas. I think one of the area that started the problem was that they weren't being paid their overtime, or they hadn't been paid it, and then the morale started getting affected as a result of that. And since their return, and I noticed they keep saying they only been there 2 months and they only got 1 more month. I may not necessarily be so, but anyway, in that time, have we seen any success?
Yes, there's been a lot of success. I'm surprised at success. I mean, the morale is up, and we try our best to give them whatever they need, especially training and other things like that. We're working real hard, and I must say they're cooperating with us.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, we've addressed the long outstanding and really troublesome issue of unpaid, I don't want to call it overtime, but money that was due to the officers. We paid that, we've settled those accounts, and we've had the review done, and as I indicated yesterday when I was winding up, and as I think the chief officer indicated previously, we're going through a restructuring exercise with respect to the fire service, and we expect that we'll have a substantive chief fire officer appointed, substantive deputy appointed in the near future to be able to take their service forward. There is provision for a substantial number of posts which had been vacant for a long time in the current budget. It's not what we need, but it is certainly significantly more than we currently have. So I think we're on the right track, although if we had more resources, we'd be able to get it to where it needs to be a lot quicker. But we got to play the hand we dealt in that respect.
Thank you, Mr. Premier. Mr. McLean?
Mr. Chairman, the Premier said one of the things I was going to ask, the status on that director or fire chief and deputy chief, whatever, and they replace that, fill in those vacancies. And he said, soon. Can you tell us what the status is with the recruitment process on it?
I think I better bow out at this stage and let the chief officer address these personnel issues.
Thank you. Mr. Bush?
Yes, sir. Through you, Mr. Chairman. The recruitment for the chief fire officer position is well underway. We had a good response, and the initial sift, of 9 Caymanian applicants has been done through an exercise, and the top 4 presentations that were received and judged will now move on to an assessment center and an interview. I say again, all 4 that have been shortlisted are Caymanian.
Thank you. Mr. Miller, you have a follow-up question?
Has this post been advertised overseas?
No, sir.
Mr. McLean, you have a question, sir?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to ask esteemed chief officer if I know that, well, our good friend Kirk and Mr. Grant came back out. There were other members of the former fire officers that has been reinstated as well to support this process. When a new fire chief has been appointed, are all these going to stay? I know Kirk want to go back vacation, but will they be staying on for some time or anything? Look at Kirk shaking his head.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, the current status is of the individuals who have been brought back are temporary in nature. None are permanent. Some are on a as needed basis. We recognized that through whatever reason that some experience within the fire service was missing. We had that capacity and experience in Cayman with seasoned fire officers and senior fire officers who have retired. So they have thankfully answered the call of service and come back on a temporary basis for right now.
Mr. McLean?
Mr. Chairman, I was trying to see if there was, anyway, let me put it this way. They are only here for 3 months. I have not yet heard when we hope that process of recruitment will be completed. But is it the intent to force them into extending their time if the recruitment process has not been completed within the next month? Because I think they've been there 1 month. Or ask them to. Or they have been there 2 when they were asked to go 3.
Yes, sir.
That is forced, sir. That was tongue-in-cheek.
Mr. Bush?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we will, once we have decided on the successor for the chief fire officer, we will discuss it with him or her, along with the gentlemen who have come back and who are here today, about the best way forward of taking the fire service forward and devising a strategy with them. So with all due respect, sir, I can't answer the question right now with any certainty.
Now, I'm talking about if the process is not completed within the next month.
It will be, sir. Through you, Mr. Chair.
Well, I'm glad to hear them confident words nowadays.
Are there any further questions with respect, Mr. Eden?
Just a quick off the record one, really. There's a young man from my constituency who, because of illness, was not working there anymore. Seems to be able to now manage that illness. I don't know if it's any chance of him getting hired back. I'm sure some of my colleagues and Mr. Grant may know who I'm referring to.
Through you, Mr. Chair, unaware of those circumstances, but happy to look into those issues going forward.
Thank you. If there are no more questions concerning these two appropriations, we will now move to the vote. All those in favor of appropriation HCA 15, Emergency Domestic Fire Services, for $6,593,891, and appropriation HCA 17, Aerodrome Fire Services, for $4,880,356, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
And those against, no. HCA 20, Technology Support Services, for $6,569,406. Are there any questions concerning this appropriation, HCA 20? If there are no questions, then all those in favor of HCA 20, Technology Support Services.
Mr. Chairman, forgive me, I think the Chief Officer was asking for just one small intervention.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, just a special thanks to Mr. Kirkland Nixon and Mr. Roy Grant. Just want to publicly say again thank you to them for coming back to the public service whilst, and the others who have come. They've all done many years in the public service. They deserve the rest. And I think certainly the ministry and the country is indebted to them. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All those in favor of HCA 20, Technology Support Services, $6,569,406, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. HCA 24, services provided by the London office, $676,994. Mr. Miller?
To you, Mr. Chairman, let me declare up front that my son works in this office, and I'm not asking for anything for him. But I saw in the media that the consulting lord had been terminated, and what appeared in the media was that he was being paid a half-decent wage. And I noticed that the budget numbers has still increased. Is he not paid from this vote, or was he paid by some different subject?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct. So he was paid out of this, and the amount that he was paid we will not pay the new director anywhere near that. So I think that's the point you're trying to make. So why the increase?
I have no idea where you're paying a new director, but
well, it's within the normal civil service scale, which the consultancy previously was outside of that and above. The reasons for that is we will hire a director, which will take a portion of that, but there are also other professional services that are planned for other services that the London office may start to do.
Any further questions with respect to this appropriation? All those in favor of HCA 24, services provided by the London office, for $676,994, $994 standing as part of the schedule to the bill. Please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no.
Mr. Chairman, could you record my vote as an abstention, please?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, did we miss HCA 20?
No.
That's been covered?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Thanks.
Mr. Chairman, just a very quick intervention before I forget it. The member from East End had asked about the repair work for the civic centers in East End. And I just want to let him know that I just got a response from ministry staff saying that the tenders were in and would be awarded tomorrow for the fix.
Thank you. HCA 27, policy advice and support to the Minister of Community Affairs, $1,371,179. Are there any questions with respect to this appropriation, HCA 27? All those in favor of HCA 27, policy advice and support to the Minister of Community Affairs for $1,371,179, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
And those against, no. HCA 28, Administration of Community Assistance Programs for $5,445,316, found on page 78 of the annual planning estimates. Are there any questions concerning this appropriation, HCA 28? Mr. Miller?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I wonder if the minister could give us some idea of the criteria that is used in assessing people and
Mr. Chairman, I'm afraid based on the advice and guidance I was getting, I told the chief officer that she should send her staff home and come back tomorrow because it seemed unlikely we would reach this by before 6 o'clock. So I'm not in a position myself to answer that question.
Okay. Mr. Miller, we'll defer the question and defer the vote on that particular appropriation until tomorrow when the chief officer and her staff has returned.
Okay, thank you.
I think that would be the case for several of these appropriations here.
Mr. Chairman, I think there are one or two other matters in here that can be dealt with by the Home Affairs
Yes, sir.
Ministry, and so we can take those.
Let's do those.
NDC 1.
NDC 1, correct. CAY 2, who would deal with that? Home Affairs or Community Affairs? CAY 2, just above NDC 1.
No, CAY 2 is Community Affairs.
Community Affairs, okay. So we will deal with NDC 1 here. So the question is, are there any questions concerning appropriation NDC 1, policy, prevention, surveillance, research, information, monitoring, and evaluation for $552,958, found on page 85 of the annual planning estimates. Mr. Miller?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, several of these surveys over the last several years have indicated a continuing lowering of the age at which children start to consume alcohol. We have a very good anti-advertising program and policy regime and legislative regime for tobacco. Is there any likelihood that the policy of allowing one type of alcohol advertising but prohibiting the other is likely to be changed hopefully to prevent all alcohol advertising.
Joan Westakers, Director, National Drug Council.
Thank you.
Based on the recent discussions around the lifting of the moratorium under the liquor licensing law, the NDC put forward a paper this week to the Ministry of Home Affairs asking for consideration that if they lift the moratorium, that we look at how availability is going to affect, because we know with increased availability comes increased use. And we did ask that in that paper that we at the same time look at the advertising of tobacco and alcohol legislation.
No, the tobacco advertising legislation is in place, but the advertising for alcohol is only basically prohibits Radio Cayman and a television station from advertising. But you can, any child walking through town now is likely to have 5 vans drive across him that are all painted promoting alcohol. And
we're aware of that, and so there's an area of legislation, a specific legislation, but it speaks to tobacco and alcohol advertising, and we've asked for that particular legislation. It's quite old, maybe a revision in 1980-something to be reviewed. We are cognizant that as a community, I mean, if you look in the paper just for World Cup advertising, the number of alcohol ads that were run, that we are asking that when we look at legislative areas for reform, that as we increase liquor licensing permits, that we also look at reducing the availability, not just physical availability, but promoting substances such like alcohol in our communities.
because I think it has gotten completely out of hand. I mean, and the only purpose for advertising is to increase your customers. And I think it is clear evidence in the research and the stuff that you do over the last 10, 15 years, that the age of what which children start to drink and the amount they consume. And I find it very difficult to accept that that increased consumption and lowering of the age at which they start is not generated from the advertising that's out there, because that's the purpose of the advertising. The liquor people say that, no, we're not advertising to get new customers, we're just advertising for brand loyalty. But I don't think that's the case. So I hope that the government will consider, I'm asking the government to favorably consider some alterations to the alcohol advertising.
Thank you, Mr. Miller.
Mr. Chairman, what I can say is, in the review that is going on with respect to the liquor licensing law, as Ms. West has indicated, the full range of views are being taken on board, and how we proceed with respect to new legislation affecting the sale of liquor will also bear in mind the representations made by Mr. Miller and others who have concerns, similar concerns.
Thank you. Are there any more questions on this particular appropriation? Ms. O'Connor-Connolly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I wonder if I could ask the lady what steps are being taken to curb or negate the increased consumption of alcohol in the BRAC, and whether or not there have been any studies showing the negative impacts. As I think one member rightly said, the age level for consumption there has conspicuously been lower and lower.
We do work with a group in the BRAC. The BRAC has their own unique set of circumstances. The National Anti-Drug Strategy, which is under revision, does have specific targets for Cayman BRAC, which came from consultation with the members and the persons, individual stakeholders in the BRAC. Just looking at ways in which we can reduce the negative impacts. Right now, there's no one on the BRAC. From the National Drug Council, we are sending staff from here. We work with the schools there. We're providing them with materials, whatever we can to support them. As we look at ways to grow and develop, we are trying to increase awareness and programming in the BRAC. We include them in the works that we do. We're undertaking a prevention strategy, and we're trying to get involvement from Cayman BRAC. But again, when it's not in a full-time capacity, it becomes more difficult. As we look at reducing the impacts, we know that education is critical, and we're trying to get into more and more schools. Just this year, we started in primary schools in Grand Cayman. Our goal is to develop the curriculum that we are able to then pass on to the schools that they can implement on their own and incorporate into the academic system, that kids are getting drug and alcohol education from an earlier age, because it makes no sense to start when they're in high school.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I wonder if I could make a plea to the lady to see whether it's possible to maybe target groups, for example, public works departments, to go in on a half day or whatever amount of hours it's going to take and do some education exercises there. And just have someone on the ground, even if it's for a test, because it is alarming to see the destruction that alcohol is causing within the BRAC community.
We will speak with the stakeholders. I know we've had a request for the training of all the food and beverage servers in the BRAC, and it's something that we're going to undertake as soon as we can get the go-ahead. We will look at other core groups that we can work with.
Mr. Miller?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, do you currently have any educational programs in the primary schools, and are you getting the support from the education department to introduce drug awareness and alcohol in the primary schools?
We are in Bordentown Primary and Savannah Primary right now. Just started in Easter. We've only gotten an additional staff member this year. We're a small office. We're already covering 200 and something presentations a year. This was outside of including primary schools with one staff member. We have started now in the primary schools just a pilot program. We're looking at developing the program, see how it works, to be able to incorporate it into other schools. We've had requests from Northside Primary. We've done 2 segments with them, and we will continue as often as we can to provide the services that are needed, and we do middle and high schools, public and private.
Do you still accept volunteers to help you with your programs at those levels? Okay.
Absolutely.
Give me a call after the show.
Thank you.
Wouldn't quite look at it, think of it as a show, but
Confession is good for the soul.
Ms. Rivers?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, do you have a train-the-trainer type of program that you could possibly introduce to help supplement? You obviously made reference to the restraints or constraints related to staffing, but it's as a follow-up to the member from Northside's question about getting it into the schools as quickly and as efficiently as possible. Is there a potential to have such a model rolled out? And if so, what supports would you need in order to do that?
Absolutely. That is our goal, because we do not have the manpower to be able to do this throughout Grand Cayman and Cayman BRAC. Our goal is to be able to train teachers on an ongoing basis, as well as counselors. And every year we do get invited to the counselor group before school starts to be able to help them and guide them in how to address the problem. What we are developing is curriculum that we hope to roll out to the school. We had developed some basic guidelines. The schools didn't think that was enough. They wanted specific lesson plans. The problem with that is it changes from teacher to teacher. We were developing the framework. We're trying to look at ways to be able to encourage teachers to implement the programming, because for us, it's not about developing new programs. It's about how do you teach drug and alcohol education in any stream of the curriculum, whether it's science and looking at how it affects the body, or geography and where it's developed, and getting teachers to understand that. So as soon as the schools are willing, and the Department of Education and Ministry of Education is willing to take that on as a role, we are happy to develop the program in further to support educational facilities to start implementing those, because we do need to see drug and alcohol education starting at the kindergarten level.
I have Minister, you had a follow-up question? Okay.
Mr. Chair, through you, more of a comment as well as a question, to say I'm very interested in hearing and knowing that you are able and prepared to develop the curriculum in order to introduce this type of program, and to say that I would very much want to develop that collaboration with our professional development team to ensure that that curriculum can actually take root. So I would ask you to proceed on developing the program, and we will I will work with my staff to make sure that we figure out a way to actually get it on the ground.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bush and then Mr. Eden.
You said teachers and counselors through you, Mr. Chair, teachers and counselors, but if you have other people in the community that may have been retired, people that are good people that want to do this, that they can also work. This will, like he said, volunteers. Are it still possible that the general public, some people that want to help could get involved as well and be trained along with the teachers as well?
Absolutely, because
Thank
it is
you.
going to take a community to be able to get this initiative in place. Because it's not just about telling kids not to use drugs and alcohol. This is about looking at what the preventative factors are. It's about educating parents. It's about educating our communities. And in some instances, we have to look at sexually transmitted diseases and drug and alcohol, and we would then rely on places like the Red Cross or the Cayman AIDS Foundation to provide support to us. It's not one agency doing the work. This has to be a collaborative approach. So any volunteers who are skilled and willing, we are willing to work with.
Mr. Eden and then Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I like the song that Ms. West is singing. Some of us will remember years gone by when the police had a program in the primary schools called DARE. I would encourage her to see if she can wake that up also. And as I agreed, Mr. Miller from Northside, we can't wait till these children get into the high school. We need to, and as she talked about, incorporating and bringing the parents on board with these things and to let them know what's going on.
Thank you, Mr. Eden. Mr. Miller?
To the Premier, is there any kind of national drug plan that coordinate these agencies with particular objectives and outcomes to be achieved?
The National Anti-Drug Strategy for 2009 to 2013 expired. It is being reviewed. It is in my binder, and I am working on it. We are waiting for some outstanding data, but we've decided to move forward with it, and the cabinet note and the draft document is prepared. What that is to bring us in line as well with international and regional expectations, to have a national anti-drug strategy to coordinate not just demand reduction, but supply reduction. And so in doing so, when we present it to the Ministry of Home Affairs to take it to Cabinet, what it will allow us to do is monitor the implementation of the plan. What are the expectations? Who's responsible for it? So that we're not looking at duplicating services and putting strain on others, but how do we best manage and coordinate the services to reduce the impacts of drugs in our communities?
And this plan will span the multi-agencies that should be involved and the other ministries as well?
It's government, non-government, and private sector.
Are there any more questions on this particular appropriation? If there are no further questions, then all those in favor of NDC 1, policy, prevention, surveillance, research, information, monitoring, and evaluation for $552,958, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
And those against, no. Mr. Premier, I think. Thank you, Ms. Dakers.
Mr. Chairman, we have a number of transfer payments that we could deal with and an equity investment. But before we do so, I've just been advised that we have inadvertently given some wrong information to the committee.
Yes.
And I want to fix that before we move on. So I'll ask the
Thank you.
Yes, Mr.
Chief
Chairman.
Officer to do so.
And I apologize to you and the committee for the mix-up. And once I explain, it was in regards to the number of individuals.
What particular appropriation?
It was during the fire appropriation when I was talking about the chief fire officer position.
Okay.
It was in the context of the amount of individuals who were initially shortlisted due to meeting the minimum requirements. I said it was 9, with a short list of 4 happening. That is actually the number of individuals representative for the director of the London office. The response to the chief fire officer, again, it was all Caymanian, but it was only 4 initially shortlisted, with 2 further shortlisted for invitation to the assessment center and interview. So just wanted to clarify. I do apologize for the mix-up, but that's why.
Thank you, Mr. Bush. Turning now to transfer payments. Looking primarily at appropriation TP 58, support for services at the Red Cross 70,000, and TP 69, support for the Bridge Foundation 60,000. Both of those found on page 287 of the annual plan and estimates. TP 58 and TP 69. Are there any questions with respect to these two appropriations? Mr. Miller?
I have some questions, but on the Bridge Foundation, but I don't, with the commuter services being here, what is the criteria and who is this Bridge Foundation?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'll ask Ms. Catherine Dinswell-Powell, who's the Deputy Chief Officer for Corrections and Rehabilitation in the Ministry, to answer that question, if you please.
Ms.
Good
Miller,
evening.
for the record, please state your name and title.
Yes, Catherine Dinswell-Powell, Deputy Chief Officer with the Ministry of Home Affairs with responsibility for corrections and rehabilitation. Mr. Chairman, through you, Mr. Miller, would you mind just repeating your question for me, please?
Who is the Bridge Foundation and what is it supposed to do?
Let me just refer quickly to a report that talks about the makeup of the board. The board consists of Mr. Lemuel Hurlston, Mr. Charles Jennings, Mr. Terence Delaney, and Mr. Bud Valinsky. And the foundation initially was referred to as the Hope Foundation when it was first incepted, and it largely came about as a result of a recognition within the recovering community that there was a lack of transitional supportive housing for alcoholics and drug addicts in the community in the Cayman Islands. And I think people who were in successful recovery realized that this is critical for people to be rehabilitated successfully, and saw the need, in light of the gaps that existed in the system, to pull together and create the foundation which would provide that type of housing.
You said Mr. Lem Hurlston, Mr. Charles Jennings, and Mr. Bud?
Mr. Bud Valinsky, or his first name is Frank, sorry.
His what?
His first name is Frank. He's
Frank?
referred to as Bud. And Mr. Terence Delaney.
Which one of these has the technical skills to do this kind of rehab work?
I think I need to clarify the work that is done within transitional housing is not therapeutic or clinical. The definition of transitional housing is the provision of a safe living environment with certain rules in place around the need to be clean and sober, the need to be actively either employed or engaged in seeking employment, the need to be responsible for your own life skills, etc., and to be participating in identified needed rehabilitation services, including but not limited to 12-step recovery programs and counseling. But those services are not actually provided by a clinician within the transitional house itself.
So this foundation does what? Goes out and gets houses, facilities, and puts what kind of program is put in place other than the requirement for them to be in the 12 Steps Alcohol program or other kind of intervention, rehabilitation, counseling?
They do get houses. So right now there is a house for male residents that I think houses, or once the renovations are complete, will house up to 10 men. I think currently it houses 6 or 7. And there are also plans to bring a female transitional house online. When people enter the program, I mean, a large number of persons coming in are referred through the prison. Some are referred in collaboration with the Department of Community Rehabilitation because they're on a community-based license or they're coming up for parole. And one of the gaps that's identified in their stable or reentry plan for stable community living is the fact that they need somewhere to live that provides them with a drug-free, supportive environment. So if you listen to a description from residents themselves about what the environment provides, it provides them an opportunity to live with other like-minded people who are committed to being clean and sober, people who understand some of the challenges that they face in order to remain clean and sober in the community, which in Cayman I think is that much more challenging because it's so small, and you have the potential to round the corner and end up in the yard of the person that you used to buy drugs from or use drugs with. There are expectations. There's random drug screening on a regular basis, reports from employers. They do job skills preparation, including resume preparation, interview preparation, etc. And you have to continue to be employed and you have to contribute to your living expenses. So there's a room and board element. They help people open bank accounts, do personal budgeting, etc. because we acknowledge that lots of the soft life skills I think that many of us take for granted are pieces that people who struggle with addictions never really gained during their lifetime and lead them in lots of ways to be vulnerable when it comes to trying to survive in a day-to-day situation.
Is there a possibility that one of these persons named by you could in fact be providing employment himself for these people and extracting the room and board, and who monitors what that employing condition is?
I can speak only to the Bridge Foundation situation. Mr. Valinsky owns a private company that specializes, I believe, in the construction of things like docks. And I know that he has previously provided employment to people who have been successful in the program. I think he and a couple of clients went on TV last year on Cayman 27 and talked about that. Now, mind you, the people that I know of are people who already had skills in construction, etc. Now, to my knowledge, he was paying them the regular wage that would have been paid to a regular employee, and they in turn were making the contributions that they had agreed to upon their entry into the program at the inception.
You haven't gotten any complaints from any of the people in this program of the employment conditions with Mr. Frank Valinsky?
Yes, sir.
You have gotten some complaints?
No, I haven't had any complaints. I mean, I think, I don't know if anyone else saw what was broadcast on local television, but certainly those people spoke about the fact that were it not for having an opportunity to have both stable employment and stable residential accommodation at the same time, that in their own view, knowing their own history, their ability to remain clean and sober and really establish a strong footing in recovery would have been compromised.
What is the $60,000 to be used for if the people are going to be working and contributing to their board and lodge?
We ask the Bridge Foundation and have asked from inception that they provide us with audited financials, which they do on a quarterly basis, to show exactly how their funding is utilized. They, I think, in addition to getting supplements from people who live there, which, I mean, I think it's done on a sliding scale fee and is very much based on a needs and a means test. You have people coming out of jail who still have court fines to pay, and they might have kids to maintain and that type of thing. So, I think their goal is not to recoup the actual cost of what it costs to house them there and provide them with that service, but to have them making a contribution so that they learn about being responsible. So I don't think in any way what they collect from people helps to defray the cost of their actual accommodation. They do fundraising in the community. I know Rotary and some other entities provided them with some financial assistance. And I know, for example, that Mr. Valinsky, who is working there now, is working without any salary. So for us, I think, again, being aware of the gap in the current system with transitional housing and knowing how much the ministry has invested in rehabilitating offenders, both through the prison and through the Department of Community Rehabilitation. We saw this as, I think, a common sense move because, without stable accommodation in the community, all of the re-entry planning and the work that we've been doing with people to help them to become law-abiding, productive citizens was going to be compromised.
In their audited financials, are you satisfied that they are not renting houses for one price and government is paying them, and their government is paying them several times what that house would normally rent for in that particular area for the rental?
Yeah, I don't know that the grant that we're giving them is actually used to defray any of those expenses. I know that where the male halfway house is, the owner of that house had a family member who was addicted to drugs. And so when they heard that the foundation was looking for somewhere to sort of call home, offered their property up at what I think is a very nominal amount, if they're charging anything at all. And I know that where they've proposed to put the women's house now in West Bay is a situation where they're currently leasing or renting the property. But again, we haven't had any indication that there are any over or underinflated rates.
When they go into these communities, does the government make sure that they're complying with all of our laws prior to giving them the grant?
I would say yes. I don't think that we merely enter into contracts with them on a good faith basis. Okay. I think there is that understanding on our part.
You are aware then that the most recent incident in West Bay, where these people invited the governor down and everything else to open this house without having planning permission.
I'm aware that there was some confusion around the type of permission that was required. I am aware that 3 months ago, when they went to planning to seek permission to create a second story to the male residence, they were given permission at that stage to go ahead with the understanding that there was no need for the designation of the facility to be changed from residential to institutional. And there was a written report from planning to that effect. And I think on that principle, they went ahead with the acquisition of the women's facility. Now, I understand since then that the requirements may have changed, and we've been assured, obviously, that they'll do whatever is required to become compliant.
Does that include meeting the concerns of the residents in that particular area who, by and large, have said that that type of facility does not fit well in their neighborhood?
I will say that it was the timing of that feedback was very interesting for us. because earlier that same week there was an external evaluation being conducted by Dr. Kenneth Douglas, who is an external consultant from CARICOM, who's done quite a bit of work in Cayman for about the last 15 years in association with the National Drug Council. And when he inquired specifically about feedback that had been given to them from immediate residents in the area, it seemed like there was some feeling among some residents in the community that was completely at the other end of the spectrum. Having been through the process where we opened the residential drug treatment facility in Breakers, I'm obviously sensitive to the fact that community awareness and buy-in and support is very important. And I think, again, from the foundation standpoint, their view is that whatever needs to be done with the community in order to help them to understand what their remit is, their purpose, what they're trying to achieve, and even how the facility itself will be run. Those are conversations they're more than willing to have and are obviously motivated to have, in the hopes, obviously, that some sort of a resolution could be mediated that would allow the center to continue to open.
Are you aware that Mr. Frank Walensky basically has refused to talk to neighbors who knock on his door for an explanation?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I've been remiss in directing my feedback through you. No, sir, I wasn't aware of that.
I would suggest that you make some inquiries, because information that I have strongly indicates that one of the most respected gentlemen in that community has made several attempts to talk to this gentleman about his concerns.
Okay.
And he simply will not engage in a conversation. Has or will the government consider trying to get these kind of foundations that are established to utilize the vacant land that exists in Breakers to create these kind of transitional services for people? Because one of the concerns I have, because I went and looked at the facility, it does not appear that there's any bus service, for instance, that these people could use living in this house to get to work, even if you found them work. And I would think that one of the necessities of that transition is access to transportation to get to and from work. I don't know, I am not aware of what kind of evaluation or what kind of selective process or criteria was applied to this property for it to be selected in that neighborhood.
Through you, Mr. Chair, mindful of the fact that the provision of this type of transitional housing isn't really a part of the ministry's remit as such, I'm not sure either what sort of a process was undertaken. I think we've made recommendations before about the fact that the need for transitional housing is something that should be addressed in a national housing plan. But certainly, again, mindful of the fact that we're putting a lot of resources into the rehabilitation of offenders in both the prison system and through the Department of Community Rehabilitation, felt that it was something that was worthy of our support. Certainly, I think it would be better use of our resources if we could utilize facilities or property that was already in existence within the government's books.
Mr. Miller, any more questions, sir?
Yeah, I'm trying to be careful with how I frame it.
Okay.
Do you have evidence that the other transitional house that this group manages is successful and is operating at proper standards?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, you're referring to the male halfway house? Certainly, anecdotally, we previously had evidence from clients that their experience was positive. In looking at the submissions that were made to the ministry on a quarterly basis in terms of their financial statements and their reports around client success, they appeared as well to be positive. We have received a draft report from Dr. Douglas, who was here last week, and while I won't speak directly to any of the findings because it still is in draft form and there is some consultation going on, my read of it did conclude that that house is operating within established criteria for transitional houses of that nature, and it was deemed to be successful, and some recommendations are being made as to how that model can be leveraged further to the advantage of the people of the Cayman Islands in the future.
This transitional house has been operating 3-4 years.
Yes, sir.
How many successful graduates have they had over that 4 years?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think when that evaluation report becomes public, I would imagine that it will indicate the results of the findings across the entire length of its operation, including the number of people who've entered and who have successfully transitioned into the community. And our involvement with assisting them has only been within the last budget year. So I wouldn't want to speak to the entire life of their success based on our limited involvement at this point.
Can I suggest, or would the ministry be inclined to do some more inquiry into what is going on in this foundation, and in particular some of the working arrangements that may have existed or still exist with some of the board members before we give them any additional money.
Mr. Chairman, I've listened to the member from Northside who seems to have no end of information with respect to this matter. Question Mrs. Dinsbell Powell for the last half an hour with respect to this matter. I think she has answered every question that he asked comprehensively. He seems to have some beef with this program or with some of the directors of this program or the management of this program. I wish he would just come out and say it before he asks the government to go and devote significant more resources to carry out some wild goose investigation based on what I don't know. So if there is some issue or issues, let's put them on the table. Let's say what they are, because I am not going to commit the ministry to go down a road. We've done a tremendous amount of research on this matter. We have a report. Disbel Powell has been at pains to explain all of that process. And we're here now to vote yes or no on the $60,000. So if there's something, please say so. If not, I would ask you, sir, to put it to the vote and let's get it behind us.
Mr. Miller, are you willing to divulge what it is that you expect them to find when they conduct their research?
No. And what I'm trying to get the minister to do is to be, in my view, in a better position to give people like myself comfort, because we have the issue with the planning, which is already public, and the issue in the community. And I am certain if the ministry took the time to speak to members of the community, they would be just as willing to talk to them as it was willing to talk to me. And I'll leave it at that, and it's entirely up to the Premier and his ministry whether they want to do anything about it or not.
Thank you, Mr. Miller.
Mr. Chairman, just let me say this. The board of this foundation is made up of, leaving aside Mr. Valinsky, 3 of Cayman's eminent citizens. They are on the board. In addition to this, I know this foundation is heavily backed by the Flowers family, who came themselves to make certain representations to me. I have satisfied myself that this is an above-board organization that is trying its very best to fill a gap in the community. The issue with planning is one that will have to be resolved in the usual way, and it may well be that that is not the right place for that halfway house to be built. But that is quite distinct from impugning the foundation and those who are behind it, which is the distinct impression that this committee is being given by what Mr. Miller has said over the course of his questioning. And I am not prepared to go down that road. That's all I'm saying.
Thank you, Mr. Premier. Mr. Connolly and then Mr. Hugh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the Chief Officer. Can you let me know a bit more about the process and how you determine, sorry, Mrs. Dinsbell Powell, how you determine who and how much money is there. So what types of transitional home analysis do you do? If people show up and say, I'm running a transitional house, how do you determine, who to approve and who to give money to and how much money?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. Like I mentioned before, the ministry doesn't actually have responsibility for the provision of transitional housing. I am aware that under the Ministry of Community Affairs, there is an inpatient residential treatment facility, and I believe there is a male and a female halfway house associated with that program. I'm not sure what criteria they're operating under. Certainly when we looked at the proposal that came from the foundation, we looked again at some of the statistics that they showed us in terms of the numbers of referrals that they were getting from the prison, from the Department of Community Rehabilitation, and some directly from the courts. And also at the fact that for lots of those stakeholders, their attempts to have those persons accepted into the government-funded program were unsuccessful, which meant that without this program, they would have had no alternative. So the value to the community seemed obvious. And in terms of their operating costs, the financials that they provided us, they're being audited by one of, I think, the top 4 firms for free, and seemed to be in order. And again, I think because the board was made up of a number of individuals who are very widely and I think well respected in both the business and the local resident community, felt assured that from a reputational standpoint, the organization was sound. Last budget year, I think our contributions were in the range of $15,000 per quarter. So it was $45,000 for that per annum. So it hasn't increased very much for this budget year.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the reason why I asked the question, sorry, Mr. Chairman, through you, is that, you know, when government as a whole is giving money, you know, the monitoring and the oversight of that after that fact, how do you get satisfied to do it again the next year? Other than, I know you've said you've gotten the quarterly financials, you've gotten the report, and from Dr. Douglas, but is that then satisfactory to you that this is a worthy project? And will you be doing it for other transitional houses if they come through to your ministry?
I think we were through you, Mr. Chair, I think we were quite fortunate that the National Drug Council got transitioned to us following the last general election, simply because the work that it does and it has the remit to do from a policy perspective fit very well with lots of the visions that the ministry has. One of those visions, I think, is to see standardization across the board, not just for transitional housing, but in lots of areas. So with our prison, obviously we've enlisted the support and the help of the Prisons Inspectorate because we want to make sure that we're offering correctional services that are in line with established best practices. Similarly, in the fire service, we've enlisted the assistance of the Chief Fire and Rescue Advisor for England because we want to make sure that our fire services are being provided, again, in keeping with established best practices. Our hope in spearheading this evaluation process with this particular foundation is that it will establish a standard or a benchmark by which other such programs, both public and private, can seek to be evaluated and by the same process they can then be determined to be efficient, effective, or not. Again, I don't know that we would necessarily seek to fund other such programs because this isn't directly our remit, but we're obviously willing to assist in the event that it is an initiative that the ministry responsible for that would want to undertake.
Thank you. I think that's answered most of my questions, and I'd just like to say that I agree that if this is the way going forward, we should establish criteria and, you know, a committee to review these things and put in checks and balances and ensure that, you know, it's properly taken care of. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Connolly. Mr. Hugh, haven't decided not to ask your question. Are there any more questions on these two appropriations? They're conferring.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I didn't hear that last comment.
Is there something else you wanted to add?
One more thing, Mr. Chairman, through you, because I don't think I necessarily answered directly Mr. Conley's question in regards to value for money. But if we think about the comment earlier when prison was being questioned and the fact that it costs us however much it costs to house and rehabilitate one prisoner per annum, this program costs on average about $10,000 per annum. And I think it's been proven in other jurisdictions that for every dollar you invest in rehabilitation, you save between $16 and $20 on the other end of the continuum. And that's obviously the type of value for money and wellness in the community that this ministry is trying to drive. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Inspector Pavel. If there are no further questions, then all those in favor of TP 58, support for services at the Red Cross for $70,000, and TP 69, Support for the Bridge Foundation, 60,000. Standing part of the bill, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
And those against, no. Ladies and gentlemen, members, I think we are now at given these okay, we'll consider OE 57 and OE 78 given the IE equity injections, IE 11 and OE 57. So OE 57 and IE 11. OE 57 being executive bank charges for 6,000 and IE 11. EI 11, it's getting late. EI 11, Ministry of Home and Community Affairs, Home Affairs, for $2,328,060, found on page 293 of the annual plan and estimates. Are there any questions with respect to these, Mr. Miller?
It's EI 11.
EI 11, correct, found on page 293. And OE 57 for 6,000, found on page 290. Those are the
But
two.
that's, Mr. Chairman,
Yours is 301, Arden, I believe.
290.
Look on 301.
OE 57 is 41,000.
It's split between OE 57 and OE 78. Sorry, 1 second, Mr. McLean.
Where you looking on it? 297.
290?
It's on 301, I see it.
Mr. McLean, it appears that for OE 57, the balance of the figure of 41,000 is split between two ministries, the Ministry of Home Affairs and the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development. For the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development, the figure would be 35,000. Hence, together, 6 and 35 being the 41,000.
But isn't that 41,000? Isn't it? 290.
290 OE.
Mr. Miller and Mr. McLean, on page 307, you will find appropriations to the Minister of Finance and Economic Development. About halfway down the page, you'll see the OE 57 and the figure of 35,000. So the 35,000 plus the 6,000 gives the 41,000 for the figure of the appropriation OE 57. The total. EI 11 found. Let us consider the OE 57 first. Get that out the way, and then we go to the much larger appropriation of EI 11. So, are there any questions on OE 57 executive bank charges for $6,000 found on page 290 of the annual plan and estimates?
This or what to 6?
No, sir.
No, no,
It's correct as it is there.
So you're doing them on the premier ministry then, you're saying?
Mr. McLean, you're okay? Okay. If there are no questions, then we will proceed to vote on that particular appropriation. So all those in favor of OE 57, executive bank charges for $6,000, standing as part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye. And those against, no. Turning now to EI 11, Ministry of Home and Community Affairs, Home Affairs for $2,328,060, found on page 293 of the annual plan and estimates. Are there any questions?
I was just asking if you had a breakdown of what you were going to, what the equity investment was.
Are you able to break that down, Mr. Bush?
Mr. Chairman, I'll attempt to break down. $130,000 for the Immigration Detention Center building, facilities, and security upgrades. $21,000 for the Immigration Intelligence equipment. The Computer Services Department, $39,880 for government applications, database, and development tools, upgrades, and $170,680 for Cayman Islands Government Enterprise Storage and Storage Backup Solution Expansion and Upgrade, $6,500 for Cayman Islands Government Security Network Monitoring, Auditing, and Reporting Services. At the prison, $60,000 to fit out 5 cells at Eagle House, $150,000 for the prison administration building, and $1.1 million to replace the external fence. Mr. Chairman, with respect to the e-government initiative I spoke about, or the continuation of that, because we're not starting from scratch, $650,000 for the business process re-engineering and move of services to online with respect to immigration, applications, and so forth, and police records. And so that comes to the total of $2,328,060.
The 600,000 for the integration of the immigration for
650.
650,000.
Yeah.
But they all gone, the police records, according to the paper today. They don't have to integrate the police records, they all, you see the hard drive crash.
Mr. Miller, through the chair, Mr. Chairman, sir, I know you know better than to believe everything you read in the Compass.
I don't believe anything I read there.
Gentlemen,
But more importantly, on the e-government, the Premier, somebody announced in one of the speeches that you were hiring a director of e-government.
Yes.
I don't find the position in the budget though. Is it there, or is that part of the 650,000?
No, sir, it isn't. That's under the Cabinet Office.
And the position is under the Cabinet Office?
Yes, it should be, yeah.
The $1 million for the prison fence, that is the 8-foot high concrete right around, 1 point something million? Sounds expensive, but I guess it.
Mr. Chairman, I'm being advised that figure also includes the upgrade of the interior fence or the as well, and the cameras. Yeah.
Are there any questions, Mr. McLean?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, can somebody explain what is Eagle House being used for now?
Through the chair, Eagle House currently is one of our wings. At the moment, it's just being used for the general male population. We had to make sure that, as from November, I think it was the 6th, that we separated juvenile children offenders under 18s in a separate facility. We've done that temporarily in one of the wings. The money will be used to refurbish the part of Eagle House to make it fit for purpose for 8 juvenile offenders.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask the Premier, when will we see our juvenile offenders removed from Northwood Prison? This has been more than 10 years.
Much more than that, through you, Mr. Chairman, much more than that, Mr. McLean. The reality is we do not have a secure juvenile remand center to which the court can remand juveniles. And until the day that we have that, that is the only option available to us.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sure there are others in here remember when the UDP government of 2001 to 2005 was going to build this remand center called Eagle House. I don't know whether it was claws or head of the eagle or what, that we so strenuously objected to it because of the stigma it was going to place on our youth. Tony, yeah? But we have, I don't know, we have beseeched, we have begged, we have done everything to try and get this place out of there. How many youth do we have incarcerated in Eagle House right now?
Four, Mr. Chairman, through you, four. Mr. Chairman, I know that I'm stating the obvious, but we've been in government for almost exactly 1 year. And to expect us to have resolved what the member himself admits is a problem of at least a decade, I hope that's not what he's suggesting. I mean, I know he's speaking over the mic and therefore he speaks in a certain way, but what is he suggesting?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not speaking in a special way other than the Premier speaks in, and that is that I have concerns, if that's the way he speaks. But, Mr. Chairman, certainly with 4 youth, there must be someplace else we can find. I just heard a vote for halfway house. The government must be can find one of those homes and put 4 kids in, and have proper security to ensure they stay there. It's just not a good situation, and the Premier may say as he please. I am not trying to blame him. I'm merely asking that we do something different. As soon as these kids, 14 to 24 or 25 or something like that that is considered youth, as soon as they go to Northwood, that's the end of their lives.
Mr. Chairman, I am not arguing against the member's point. His point is absolutely valid. We do need a proper, secure remand center for juveniles, but we don't have one other than what's available at Eagle House. Bonaventure is not secure. The Francis Borden home, because it's not just girls that are there now. We have at least one young man as well. Those are not secure facilities. Whenever we take kids who are even medium risk and put them there, almost inevitably they just run away because the facilities are not equipped for remand purposes. So the situation that we have is I can't even say it's far from ideal. It's just not up to the standard that we need. All I'm saying to the member is that we haven't had the capacity to fix it over all of these years, and we certainly don't have the capacity and haven't had it in the last year to magically create a secure remand facility. But it is something that we, as a country and as a government, we must do, and we must do as quickly as we possibly can. But we can only do it when we have the means to do so.
Thank you,
Mr. Chairman, I do know that the Constitution of 2009 placed extra requirement upon us to provide one, and I think it's November this year. Yes, it's November this year, I think it is. Mr. Chairman, in view of that, understanding that out of the 5 years that it has been required now by constitutionally, this government has only had it for 1. Can the Premier and the government look at something like maybe sending, if you only got 4, you know, that may swell to 10 maybe over the next couple of years. Can we just look at something about sending them overseas to some recognized school?
Mr. McLean, I recognize your concern in this area, but at the same time, we are a country that is bound by financial constraints, and primarily those that the UK has imposed. We do have to keep in mind that we can do so much at a time and no more. I recognize your concerns, but
Okay.
it would require significant capital expenditure to do immediately what is being asked, as well as operational costs to send these kids overseas. So I think we just have to accept that we're going to do the best we can as quickly as we can, and at this stage decide whether or not we vote for or against the particular appropriation. We can talk about it till the cows come home. It ain't going to change what we're capable of doing at this time.
All right.
So if there are no further questions, all those
Leave them alone. I'll be right on the middle road too.
All those in favor of EI 11, Ministry of Home and Community Affairs, Home Affairs, $2,328,060, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
And those against, no. That brings us to the close of proceedings for this evening. We will suspend for the evening. We will adjourn for this evening and resume at tomorrow morning at 10 a.m.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
before you close, sir, just seeking some guidance. When should I tell, since seeing I'm up next, when should I tell my people to be here?
I would say probably after lunch, sir. You,
Mr. Chairman, we have the Ministry of Community Affairs, and then we have the Cabinet Office. I think we're looking at Monday.
I would say tell them to stand by from about 3 o'clock.
I hope you're right.
Perhaps then by lunchtime we'll have a better idea.
Yeah.
Okay.
They can stand by.
But have them on standby.
Yes,
All right.
sir.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.